Yeah, I was going to wait to do it a little once we got really
Okay,
going. But yeah, but we're going
idea.
now. So
it is now.
Okay, good.
Oh, I pressed my picture out for some reason. Thank you, Daryl.
No, that was Ben actually. So
Ben did that. Ben set it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Eddie.
Hello. Excuse me. I'm just trying to wolf down some dinner.
Oh, good. No worries.
Okay, I'm having some nice Soffy here right now, so you know we all in it together.
Yay! All right. Let me go grab something to drink. Hold on. Oh. Here. For a second. Bye. Right. There we go. Oh. Right. Yay! Welcome everybody. I'm sure we're going to have some more people join us, but I want to get this started so our writers can have a wonderful time and tell you about how they've been writing, how they got produced, and what things they're working on in the future. As an introduction, I'm Harold Slazer. I'm at Middle Church, and I have been working with Carol Where's Becky on the creative writing classes that we do every Thursday on Zoom now. We also have a monthly live writing class now over at the Solomon Gundy Club on 12th Street and 5th Avenue, the last Tuesday of every month. So if anybody in the city wants to join us live, once a month we do that. And if anybody wants to join us weekly on Zoom, we're here every week, the same Zoom link with passcode 620201, and you can join us. And we have a wonderful group of writers who have been working with us and creating beautiful stories and things for many months. And we're happy to do the Zoom. But for tonight,
Harold,
yes.
you want to put your email in the chat so people can get on your list?
All right, yes, please. I'll put my email in the chat, or you guys can put your emails in the chat and I will put you on the list so that you will always be hearing our word of the week to prompt you into some idea for writing. Without further ado, what we're doing today is we've asked 5 wonderful writers who have actually been published to talk about their work, how they got published, and all the other ways about that. Maybe talk a little bit about their work. And then at the end, after we've let everybody talk, we can take questions. If you'd like to send me questions in the little memo box, please do, and I can ask those later on. If you don't want to ask them yourself, or you can use the hand gesture to ask questions later. All right. Without further, our guests tonight are Kate Walter, Eddie Sefferty. We have Carol Wears Becky, Natalie Perkins, and of course, Ben Perry. We'd like to introduce Kate Walter first. Kate Walter. Let me find your, oh no, I had your bio here just a moment ago. Oh no, Kate Walter. Where is my bio here? Sorry about this. As the author of 2 memoirs, Behind the Mask, Living Alone in the Epicenter, and Looking for a Kiss, a chronicle of downtown heartbreak and healing. Her essays and opinion pieces have appeared in the New York Times, Newsday, New York Daily News, AM New York, Next Avenue, The Advocate, The Village Sun, and many other outlets. She taught writing at SUNY and NYU for 3 decades. Welcome, Kate Walter. Yay!
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay,
definitely.
so the format said we should talk a little bit about the book and then read. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can do that. Hang on for 1 second. Everybody, please mute yourself so Kate can just be heard, so we don't hear
Okay.
some background things.
So
Yes.
about the book, Behind the Mask is a pandemic memoir in essays. It covers the period from March 20th to June 2021. I started writing essays for the Village Sun. I was basically writing to keep my sanity when we went into lockdown. I was really freaked out, and writing became my salvation. So I wrote these essays from March through December, and then someone said, a professor friend said, you're writing a memoir in essays. So I pitched it to my publisher, Naomi Rosenblatt at Heliotrope Books, and she said, go for it. So I got a contract, and then I wrote the rest of the book. Obviously, I wrote this fast. I feel like the book is history. I mean, we went through this unbelievable period in New York City, an unprecedented time, and I recorded it totally from my own point of view. So I'm going to read 2 sections. Middle Church is in the book in 2 places. There's a whole essay about the fire. I'm not going to read that one. It's too sad. I'm going to read this section. It's called Hitting the Wall from February 2021, and it's about watching church online and how that boosted me through the pandemic. So I'm reading a section called Hitting the Wall, February 2021. Can everyone hear me okay? I watch church live streamed every Sunday. On February 7th, the start of Black History Month, Reverend Jackie preached a sermon echoing the theme, I am so tired, I'm tired in my bones, my body hurts, my head hurts. Reverend Jackie rolled on. She was tired of the pandemic, tired of the violence against Black bodies, tired of the political shenanigans, tired of how January 6th was brushed over, tired of how America works, tired of Zoom, tired of having the same conversations over and over. While the online services were comforting, I miss seeing Reverend Jackie walk out onto the altar. She was an attractive woman, a great dresser, who alternated from colorful ministerial robes to power suits, from high heels to boots. Her fashionable wardrobe and changing hairstyles caused gay men to gush as she entered the sanctuary. Oh my God, she looks fabulous. Jackie was a charismatic preacher. I miss seeing her leave the altar during an emotional sermon and walk up and down the middle aisle, tears filling her eyes as she wrapped up a dramatic conclusion. It was 2 months since the church had burned down and almost 11 months since we had met inside the sanctuary. Donations to the rebuilding fund had already topped over $1 million. The insurance policy covered $20 million, but it would probably cost many more millions to rebuild and furnish a church sanctuary in New York City. I didn't know how Jackie did it. It had to be difficult, even with a great staff and a supportive husband. She was dealing with the full-time work of the fire, comforting her grieving congregation and focusing on rebuilding. She had to fit all that into the regular church ministry, now totally virtual, while COVID loomed as a backdrop. But clearly her faith got her through, and a loving community held her up. God is not exhausted, she preached, and promises rejuvenation and restoration. I totally related to feeling tired and worn out, and I did not have many responsibilities. I was tired of wearing a mask, tired of the cold and snow, tired of being alone, tired of not being touched and hugged. I missed my friends and family and desperately wanted a massage. I walked regularly, but the sidewalks were gross with piles of dirty snow and recycling piled on the mounds. After 11 months of this, I felt I was hitting the proverbial wall. I hoped that getting the vaccination would perk up my mood and get me to the finish line. At least I feel less anxious about getting sick. I tried to focus on gratitude as a way to get through the wall. I was financially secure. I lived in a rent stabilized building in a desirable neighborhood. I had my writing, a key to my survival. At this service in February, we improvised communion in our respective homes to honor the 400,000 people who died of COVID. I had a cracker and fruit juice, and I made a donation to the Rebuilding Fund. Volunteers were helping to arrange vaccine appointments, and the church was supporting those struggling to pay their bills due to COVID. In her blessing at the end, Reverend Jackie reassured us, we're gonna make it. Can I read one more section? It's short.
Yes,
One more?
go ahead.
It's
Yes,
different,
please
it's
do.
funny, it's a different tone, so the whole book isn't all serious. All right, this is towards the end. This is last spring when New York is starting to open up. At the end of April, I had lunch outside at La Bombonniere, an old school diner with a fancy name. This place had been around a long time. A few years ago, they filmed a segment of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel inside because the decor looked like the 50s. I usually had lunch at the bus stop cafe, but I wanted to support another local diner. I knew La Bombonniere had barely survived the pandemic. Their not accepting credit cards did not help the situation. I was sitting at a table set up on the sidewalk. It wasn't a formal sidewalk cafe. My chair was bumping against a delivery bike locked to a street sign. My waitress, an older Latina woman, maybe late 50s, was very friendly as I asked about the inexpensive lunch menu. I ordered a Coke and had an eggplant parm sandwich, which was really good. Later, when she gave me the check, she told me she had worked there for 30 years. While I waited for my food, I overheard her talking to a couple who walked past. They obviously knew each other, and the couple was happy to run into the chatty server. My ears perked up when I listened to this conversation. I got the vaccine, the waitress said, well, excited. I got the Pfizer. I feel young. It made me feel like a tiger. The couple started laughing, and the woman said, you were always a tiger. The waitress replied, but now I'm a young tiger. Now I was laughing too. I love this idea of the vaccine as the fountain of youth. She told the couple she got the vaccine in that new place, the one that used to be St. Vincent's Hospital. She was referring to Northwell Health on 7th Avenue, housed in one of the old St. Vincent's buildings. The rest was turned into condos. As she mentioned the vaccination site, I remember going to Northwell last spring at 7 o'clock during the height of the pandemic, standing outside with my neighbors and cheering the healthcare workers. I also recall walking past the refrigerated trucks on the side street next to the small hospital across from the AIDS Memorial. This was the second plague I had lived through in New York City. Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Two
Thank you very
different
much.
tones. One is kind of light. And the other was more serious.
Fabulous, fabulous. You want to tell us about what you might be working on right now as well?
Different moods, and I tried to capture all that. Thank you.
All right, all right. Well, thank you very much then. Let's hear from our next reader, published writer. Carol Wears Becky is a poet, reviewer, and editor. Her poetry books are Welcome Distractions, Accessible Poems for Time-Strapped Humans, a top teen greatest hits, Poets Wear Prada, 2009 and 2017. And she's an aspiring children's book author tackling issues of race and gentrification. Carol Wears Becky.
Okay, so I'm going to read maybe a couple poems. They're short. This is called Spring Thaw. I like the idea of a watch driven by a heartbeat and clocks fueled by the sun and a job touched by luck. The Earth's rotation propelled by a cat's introspective purr as a warming trend quickens the universe. Carriage horses stamp and snort under the blood moon, and rabbits nibble the leaves in the vineyard, a midnight tableau of peaceful cohabitation. The breath of a penitent melts frost into dew. In other words, spring arrives. The tributaries of the creek travel in all directions, coaxed by snowmelt. There is ample flour and sugar in the larder, sifted from the wings of woodland fairies. There are no velvet ropes on the world, no locked doors, and as luck would have it, you're on the VIP list, and so is everyone else. I don't really know what else to read. This book was published before the pandemic. It came out in 2018. So
Why don't you take some time and talk about what got you started writing, how you got your first book published and who helped you publish that, and what you're working on now, and tell us a little bit about those things, Carol.
okay, so my book is published by Autonom Media, and this is a small independent publisher that publishes radical books, very eclectic book list they have, and it's basically run by one person in Williamsburg who has a loft, and he does his whole operations from there, from a computer with two huge monitors. And it was a friend of mine in my writing circle that actually encouraged me to submit my manuscript to Jim. And I submitted my Word file, and then I worked with the publisher to pick the font and, you know, design the cover and everything. So it was out in a very short space of time, and it's print on demand. It's available on Amazon, which I like. And that's really it. I did not have to submit a query or anything because these were people I knew. My aspiration is to get my young adult novel published, and that's going to be a much heavier lift. It's a novel with all urban cats, like bodega cats and cats in, you know, storefront businesses. They're the main characters of my novel, and it has sort of implications for urban development and diversity. I don't really know how else to explain it, but that's going to be a much harder thing to try to do. I've also, during the pandemic, discovered the ukulele as a hobby. So some of my poems have turned into songs. And that's about all I'm going to say for now. There'll be more questions later.
Thank you, Carol, very much. Lovely hearing about your journey. And we'll keep you aside for some questions a little bit later. Let's hear from Ben Perry. He is minister at Middle Church and an award-winning writer whose work has appeared in and out in outlets like the Washington Post, Slate, Sojourneys, and Bustle, with a degree in psychology from SUNY and MDiv from Union Theology Seminary. Perry worked as an organizer in the New York chapter of the Poor People's Campaign, editor of Time. Perry appeared on MSNBC, Al Jazeera, New York One, editor of Queer Faith. He and his spouse, Erin, live with his brother in Maine and are nurturing a small apple orchard right now. He also has a book coming out, Cry Baby, and I can't find the rest of it, so he'll tell us. Ben, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Harold. Yeah, my book is called Cry Baby, Why Our Tears Matter. Like cry, comma, baby. It's being published by Broadleaf Books. I'll say a little bit about sort of the publishing process before I read a short excerpt. So the book actually started as an essay that I wrote that ended up in the Washington Post. So that, and then, an editor from Broadleaf reached out and said, hey, would you ever think about writing a whole book about crying? So it was an essay about how I had sort of stopped crying and sort of taught myself how to cry again. But just to say that, if you're writing and you really want to write a book, one of the great ways to just, get your voice out there is try to find, articles and other places that you can, write for and start putting things out into the world, because you never know when all of a sudden you're going to get a DM from a publisher who says, hey, I'd love you to write a book. So it doesn't necessarily have to go through the traditional like query and publisher route that a lot of people go through. There's lots of different ways to publish books, as many different ways as books end up being in the work. So anyways, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the process later, but I'll read a short excerpt from my book. If I can bring it up, let's see. Here we go. I can't remember when I stopped crying. I never woke and decided, no more tears for me. There was no pivotal moment, no traumatic incident in which I wept openly, was gruesomely mocked, and swore off tears forever. Yet, by my early 20s, assuredly as if I had cauterized my tear ducts, I hadn't wept in years. If I wrote this about any other crucial biological process, that statement would be remarkable. And imagine opening a book saying, I haven't pooped since Bush was president, or it's been a decade since I last sneezed. And such a confession would be headline news, or at the very least, you'd suggest I consult a doctor. When it comes to crying, not crying is not only unremarkable, it's oddly normative. Obviously, defecation is somewhat more crucial to our continued survival. However, the degree to which you might be shaking your head and scoffing at the comparison bespeaks how we've denigrated crying to something that's quotidian at best and at worst shameful. Just skip ahead a little bit. Emotional numbness is sneaky. You don't realize how much you've closed yourself off until you begin to feel again. It had become normal for me to witness pain, anguish, beauty, love, and ecstasy with detached indifference, or else with the simulacra of each emotion. I could experience broad contours, but they were all nearer to my resting state than any heightened sensation. I'd watch shadows flicker on the walls of my heart and make myself believe that they were real. That's the thing about suppressing tears. You can't just wall yourself off from sadness, because emotional tears run the full spectrum of our feelings. Humans cry when we feel deep joy, or when we're overcome with pride and admiration for someone we love. Our eyes brim before the awesome or majestic. In moments of mystical ecstasy, when we feel oceanic communion with nature or a crowd. We cry from longing, and when we're reunited with that which we long for. There's no reliable way to isolate and eliminate just one of these emotions. To staunch our tears, we must deaden ourselves to the world. We who have chosen or been forced to discard weeping walk around like ghosts. We are afraid to fully live. Too many theologians pretend resurrection of the body, talk about the resurrection of the body as if its only focus was dead people, ignoring the multitudes walking the streets already buried.
Yay, thank you, Ben. Fabulous, fabulous. All right, our next reader and published writer will be Natalie Renee Perkins. She serves as the digital minister and director of digital ministry at Middle Church, helping to build and hold its online church and community. She received her Master's of Divinity from Union Theology Seminary in 2015 and was awarded the Karen Ziegler Feminist Preaching Prize. She became an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ denomination in 2020. Thank you, Natalie, for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me. Okay, so what am I supposed to, sorry, my blood sugar said I needed to eat right now.
That's all right. You want to talk about your writing, how you got started. You can talk a little bit about what you've written. You can read some of it if you like, and just tell us about how you got on the avenue of getting published. And that's all.
I'll just say a lot of things, and if I miss something, just...
A lot.
Okay. Uh-oh, everybody froze. I think it was me. No, some other people are moving.
I can hear you, Natalie, you're good.
Okay.
That is better. We hear you.
Okay. I think I think I can say things now, right?
Yeah, I can hear you, so you're fine.
Okay. My writing journey, like when did I start writing? I guess I got officially published for the first time somewhere around 2013 or 14. 2013 is when I know I wrote it. So, and that was in a book called it was celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation, the 200th anniversary, in a book called Emancipation Proclamation Forever Free. And I wrote there was a Bible commentary, a small little blurb on the side. But that was enough, y'all, for me to be like, okay, I could do this. I like it. Let's do this thing. And then after that, I wrote for Daily Guideposts. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with that publication. They put out a full year of devotionals with a multitude of writers. And I was like a little speck of pepper in a sea of salt of those writers. But I did that for, I think, 4 years or so. I think from like 2015 to 2019 are the ones that I'm in. So I was writing, that would mean I'd be writing 2014 to 2018 or something like that. The book I'm writing now, I'm co-writing with a mentor of mine, Reverend Dr. Hal Tausig, who I met at Union. He taught me about the extra canonical texts that I work with, and some of you have heard me talk about in sermons and whatnot. So this book is a collection of devotionals or meditations or reflections, whatever your word is for those sorts of things. It's a collection of those sorts of things, but they use the extra canonical text as scripture, and they often center marginalized stories. So the people you generally wouldn't hear about in a devotional. And some of them are also just personal stories. So that's also with Broadleaf, where Ben is. And as of right now, it'll come out in June of 2023. So, but we'll see. Things are messy in publishing is what I'm learning. The book is called In Trembling Boldness, Ancient Wisdom from Jesus People. And I can read one of the devotionals. I hadn't considered that was the thing we were doing, so I'm just popping it up now. Okay, the very first one is called Truth is Out. He pulled his coat closer around him, bracing against the cold wind. He still couldn't believe he was out. Out on the streets of his old neighborhood with a house full of loved ones nearby. Out taking a walk, unsupervised. He glanced behind him to make sure. Out from behind barbed wire fences and prison bars. Out. He had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They wanted him to die there. But now he was out. He clung to a little scrap of paper where he'd scribbled down the verses of an ode he'd found in a book in the prison library. He'd gone back to the library the day before he was released to jot them down. It was the only thing he wanted to take with him from that place. I went up to the light of truth as to a chariot, and truth led me and brought me, then caused me to pass over chasms and fissures, and I was removed from cliffs and valleys. Truth became a haven of salvation for me and set me upon the place of immortal life. Ode 38, 1-3. He had it memorized by now, but he liked to keep it. He folded it back up into his wallet. These few verses had anchored him. They'd focused him and centered him through a really hard time, through all those years, through the many appeals, through the countless hours spent poring over legal documents, through the countless email exchanges between his legal team and the Innocence Project that sometimes swung like a pendulum between hope and despair, through the tearful visits from his mama and his spouse. The truth shall set you free, his mama always said toward the end of their visits. Her faith in God was deep and had carried her through. She was much older now, moved slower, but she never gave up hope that he would be exonerated. He didn't really believe in God the same way she did, but he thought she might like these few lines. As he turned back and began to walk toward the family gathering to celebrate his return, He decided to share it with her later.
Yay. Thank you, Natalie, for sharing beautiful work. Thank you. All right. Our next panelist is going to be Eddie Sefferty. He is a comedian and writer. Eddie Sefferty has appeared on The Today Show, Comedy Central's Premium Blend, Logos Wisecracks, The Joy Behar Show, and is one of the subjects of a documentary, Laughing Matters. Eddie's first book, a collection of humorous essays entitled Mental, Funny in the Head, Kensington, received an excellent reviews, is currently in its third printing, and was the feature selection of Sight Out Book Club. He's also helped work with Judy Gold and has come back from a writer's retreat in Finland. Please welcome Eddie Sefferty.
Hey, Hal, thanks. I wasn't really aware we were supposed to read something, so I've just picked something quickly. It's an excerpt from a story that was in my book Mental, about a trip I took with my parents probably 25 years ago. They had never been out of the country, and I took them on a trip to London and Paris after my father was diagnosed with Pick's disease, which is a form of dementia. And my mother was afraid to go by herself with him. So it was stressful. My father actually was very easy. He was just like a big kindergartner. My mother was stressed all the time. She'd never been out of the country. She didn't like going to restaurants where the menu was not in English because she has a lot of food phobias. So we always ate at kind of crummy restaurants. And she was convinced, because my grandmother told her that the French were very anti-Semitic. So in this section, we've been in the Louvre. We've seen a bunch of stuff. My father got very agitated in crowds and would have these sort of panic attacks. And he couldn't really speak, but he would sort of grumble and shake. We've gone through it. My father's getting very stressed, and this is the end of this section. Even without a time restriction, the Louvre is overwhelming. The number of baby Jesus paintings alone is staggering. And I imagine God as the annoying new papa, ready to pull 100 canvases out of his wallet and bore anyone unwittingly congratulating him on the new arrival. After several hours, I can't concentrate any longer. The art is going in one eye and out the other. Ma, I think we've had enough of the Madonna. How about you? She's not so much to look at. Come on, Mike. He follows unquestioningly as our feet instinctively take us to the gift shop. Museum shops fascinate me, and I always end up spending a disturbingly large proportion of my visits leafing through books of the exhibits I've just seen. Of course, a tiny reproduction of a great painting in a coffee table volume can't compete to the original, but focusing on a book lets me block out all the other people, other artwork, and dead air competing for my attention. My mother finds the same escape and cultural experience browsing through silk scarves painted with Victorian angels and enamel pill boxes littered with Delacroix battle scenes. Even though the shop's bustling with tourists, I'm able to tune out the polyglot crowd around me and get drawn into a volume of Renaissance works. I'm captivated by the very same information I was unable to process in the galleries. And on page after page, I'm intrigued by paintings we've just seen, but which I have only the vaguest recollection. A quarter of the way through the color plates, I come across a mother and child composition that seems completely new to me. It's beautiful. Hey, Mom, do you remember seeing this painting with the infant on the green pillow? I want to go check it. They're gone. I know I should put the book down and search them out, but frankly, I'm happy to be rid of them for a while. This week is the most time I've spent with my parents in over 10 years. And these few minutes in the Louvre's gift shop are the longest I've been alone since we left the tarmac at JFK. I had turned my attention back to the book, figuring that they'll come and get me when she's bored looking at museum quality reproductions. 15 minutes later, my reading's interrupted by my mother's panicky voice. Where's your father? What do you mean? I thought he was with you. I told you to watch him while I went to the ladies' room. You did? I did. I don't think you did. Don't tell me I didn't. I did. Okay, you did. Let's just find him. We frantically searched the shop and then scoured the nearby galleries for almost half an hour. My mom's beside herself and is ready to call the police, but the museum staff assures her that that's not necessary. A few minutes later, a docent spots my father sitting quietly on the bench in front of a large oil of St. Michael vanquishing the devil. My mother lets out a cry that echoes through the hush-hush rooms and draws the attention of everyone in sight. God damn it, Mike! Ignoring the spectator, she kneels down next to him, takes his hand and kisses him on the cheek. Her voice is equal parts anger and relief. You can't wander off like that. I was worried something happened to you. I sit down on the other side of him. Are you okay, Dad? He doesn't say a word, just points at the colorful image of Satan face down on the ground, crushed under the winged saint's foot. Our eyes follow his finger to the painting and then scan back up his arm to his face. From the way his eyes are focused, it's crystal clear that he isn't just staring blankly. He's not quite in the present, but he's definitely aware, almost as if he's listening to something. My mother, fixed on his profile, asks, "You like that, honey?" He nods. What do you like about it? Is it the angel? Is it the, I cut her questions off. Mom, let's just sit. My dad's intellect is shot, but the image is touching him, even if he doesn't have the words to say how. In a way, he's like an animal with limited mental capacity, but with a full complement of emotion. A combination that I, who habitually undermine my happiness with bombardments of ingenious logic, almost find enviable. Unfortunately, unlike an animal, he hasn't been deprived of shame. The disease is cruel. It's taken away his abilities, but not the awareness that he used to have them. I can tell that expecting him to speak will only fuel the unfathomable frustration he must feel, and I'm happy to let him as long as he likes. Now, my dad's always been emphatically opposed to religion. He once told a Jehovah's Witness on a subway platform, "I'm sorry, but my covenant is with Lucifer." The idea that he, who found no connection to Judaism except when cursing God for smiting him with kidney stones, is finding serenity in this Catholic icon seems preposterous. But here he is, his mind somehow put at ease by Raphael's colorful angel. The tranquility on his face is contagious. And for the first time since we left home, my mom's eyes aren't darting around like those of a prey animal. I know that no matter her thoughts on or experience with the French, she'll be forever grateful for this moment in the Louvre. We sit calmly with my dad pulled into the painting and my mother and I pulled into him. He barely moves, his hands, chapped from constant teething, gently folded in his lap. Finally, he starts to tire, and my mother, sensing that he's beginning to slip away, breaks the silence. "Mike, should we look more, or do you want to eat lunch?" "Eat lunch." She questions me. "Lunch?" "Lunch. Come on, Mike." She helps my dad up. As she's kneeling down to tie his shoe, he turns to the painting. "Bye." My mom turns her head to see who he's talking to, and then looks up into his face. It's a moment of devastating intimacy and lasts just long enough for me to feel as if I'm spying on them. "Let's go," she says. I take a last look at St. Michael as they walk toward the exit. And outside, we skirt the busy crowd and begin our search for a substandard restaurant.
Great job, Eddie. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you all writers for joining us and reading a little bit of pieces of your work and have an understanding of who you are and what you've written. I'd like to take a little moment to see if anybody has any questions, and then I'll ask a few myself. If anybody has a question, just put up your hand and I'll call upon you for now, or speak up. Dun, 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 dun. Looking for a hand. Dun, dun, dun. Someone? No? Emmett? All right. Well, okay.
I have a question, Harold.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask if Reverend Natalie could explain a little bit more what extra canonical texts are. If you could help us understand a little bit more about what that means.
Great, thanks, Daryl.
Sure. The extra canonical texts are texts that were written around the same time as everything else that's in the New Testament, but for one reason or another were left out. Sometimes that reason is #patriarchy. Sometimes it's something else, honestly. But yeah, there are a lot of texts that are written around the same time. They used to be referred to as Gnostic. Scholars are pulling away from that term in the last, I don't know, probably 25 years or so. They've been kind of pulling away from that because it has started to make it seem like these are all coming from the same place. This is a collection of texts, and that's not actually what it is. The word Gnostic is really just another word, another way to say know-it-all. That's really what they were when someone was called Gnostic in that time period. They were just calling them brainy, like in a school yard teasing way. So extra canonical texts, or some people call them non-canonical. Extra canonical texts that we deal with are those ones that were written first through my co-author deals with all of them. The ones that I deal with are primarily 1st through 4th century, but really like 1st and 2nd. And have been found in various places: Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi text, Oxyrhynchus, the trash heap there anyway. So all of these things have just been kind of happened upon. One was found in a scholar's office when he retired and was cleaning up. Suddenly he was like, what are these papyri here? He did a lot of traveling and had come upon them at some point in his traveling as a scholar and did not remember where he got them from. So we got them from various ways. Some of them we only have pieces of, and we're still honestly discovering the trash heap and Oxyrhynchus, for instance. Oxyrhynchus was an ancient city in Egypt, I think, and it was discovered by the British, and the British do what they do, and they stuck a flag in it and claimed it as theirs. And they have been going through it for the last 100 years, and they have made it through 1/10 of this trash heap in 100 years. And in that 100 years, having made it through only 1/10, we have found 4 new gospels. So we're all like, yeah, take your time, it's fine. Please take your time. So yeah, those are the extra canonical texts. Wait, are there extra canonical texts in the Hebrew scripture? I only work with things in the 1st and 2nd. Most of the things I work with are things that were written in Coptic or Greek. Some things Hal works with are Aramaic, Syriac. So I wouldn't know specifically about Hebrew scripture, but yeah, the ones we work with are later. Are extra canonical texts sometimes ones that do not recognize that Jesus is not fully God? Some of them are, and then like some of them do. So like the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, is just a collection of Jesus sayings. There's no, like the other Gospels that we have like stories that then connect these little sayings. So there's like some midrashing that happens. The Gospel of Thomas doesn't do that. But like the Under Perfect Mind doesn't say Jesus anywhere. Like it doesn't actually say the name, but that's not, we have Gospels in our traditional Bible that don't say Jesus and they're still there. So it's hard to say whether they recognize how they understand Jesus or not, just whether it's in it and how they use Jesus. So some you can tell very clearly that they do, and some just don't mention them at all. So we don't know. Is that all the one? I'm attending what are your suggestions for fiction writers? Oh, that's not a question for me.
Well, thank you. That was lovely. Thank you for helping explain that to us. I'm looking forward to hearing your book when it comes out, or reading it. Are there any more questions anyone would like to have for anyone?
Carol has one in the chat. Harold,
All
I don't
right.
see the chat. There's things happening there.
The chat room? Sure, let's look at the chats. We have attending a gathering information for my writer daughter. What are your suggestions for fiction writers as far as finding a publisher? And is she writing a novel? Yes, she has had some short stories published in academic writing journals. And Kate will talk about that. Kate, you want to talk about?
Well, I don't write fiction, but I know a lot of people who do. To sell a novel, you have to have the whole manuscript complete. Okay, I mean, then you're going to query agents, but it's not something you're going to sell partially done. You're going to need the whole manuscript completed. And then I would suggest you start looking for an agent. And the way to do that, I mean, there's lots of books that list agents, and find out what they want. They probably want a query letter and a sample chapter. Find out what they want. Find other books that are similar and maybe see who represented them. In other words, tell your daughter to go look for other books that kind of seem similar, whatever it is she's type of writing she's doing, because fiction is very wide and general in categories. Look for agents who represent that kind of fiction and then start to query them, but find out what they want. I mean, some people want a sample chapter, whatever. I don't know about proposals for fiction. I think they want the whole book, but do your research, and you have to have the whole manuscript. I don't think you can sell it up based on a chapter, not a novel. No. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Carol, I know that you go yearly to a book fair that's sometimes done in Brooklyn. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I really haven't gotten any leads from that. The problem is my novel is not really easily categorizable in terms of audience level or, what kind of pigeonhole it fits into, and publishers really like, specific audiences. Like, this is a science fiction novel for young adults. And I don't know any other work of fiction out there that's like what I wrote. So I can't really help there, but there are a couple of organizations you can join. I belong to the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. I'm sure there are lots of other organizations like that out there that you can join, and they have, conventions, and you can network with people and attend seminars. There's also all of these kinds of things that are listed in Poets and Writers or Publishers Weekly. As Kate mentioned, there are agent directories. I haven't really tried very hard to send queries out. I sent like 4 queries out before the pandemic, and didn't really hear back. It's really a lot of legwork to try to research agents and find out whether they're even taking submissions, or to find editors that will take unsolicited manuscripts. You learn all of this when you start doing your legwork. There's also the avenue of independent publishing, and that's its own kind of industry now. It's a lot more developed than it used to be. And one of my former coworkers, who is a successful published author, a young Asian woman, suggested that I submit to writing contests as a way of getting published. And I had never thought of that. So I have to look into that too. There are some listings out there. She sent me a couple of links. I haven't really investigated them yet, but you could probably go online and see, what kind of contests you can enter. And it sounds like Kate has something to say. So
I just want to say, in general, if we're talking about books, I mean, there's 4 ways to publish a book. One is to try and go big and get an agent and sell to one of the big companies. That's extremely hard. The other way to do it is to go to a small press or a university press, which is what I've done, and you don't need an agent. You can go to them directly. I sold both books to Heliotrope Press, which is in 2nd Avenue. It's a few blocks right near Middle Church. Again, it's a very small press. The other thing that's popular now is what's called the hybrid. Something like She Writes is a very popular hybrid press. where you have to like, it's sort of like a combination of self-publishing and small press. You have to pay them money, but they do a nice job. They help with publicity. And then the fourth thing, of course, is self-publishing. So there's the big people, the small press, the hybrids, and then self-publishing. Those are really the four models that are out there right now. If there's something else, I'm not sure about it, but that would apply to fiction and nonfiction. I know a few people who publish fiction, which she writes. They tried really hard to get an agent and they couldn't. So they paid about $6,000 or $7,000. They did a very, very nice job. They're getting reviews, but it's not really vanity publishing because they're very selective. They don't take anybody, but you do have to pay them. Okay, so that's the sort of new model that's come up in the last few years. I hope that's helpful.
Oh, very helpful, Kate. Kate, thank you so much. Eddie, do you want to discuss a little bit about your things, your what you've been working on, and how you actually went on the retreat to Finland?
Sure. I'm working on a novel. It's the first fiction that I'm writing, and I've gone away to 2 other writing residencies where I just can sort of just focus on that. And the first part of my novel takes place in rural Finland. So when I saw this residency advertised, I said, oh, this really, it's like, I definitely should do this. And, it was just being there in the environment. And, the rural Finland is a lot like rural Vermont or rural Minnesota, but just being in that environment, I was able to sort of fine tune the stuff that I had written in those chapters. It gave me like a better sense of totally sensorial experience. So things that I didn't necessarily think of putting in all of a sudden came to the forefront. And it was just a way for me to get away and really focus for a while because, I have the attention span of a puppy. So trying to get stuff done here is hard for me.
Great. How did you find that that space or the places you've gone to? Where did you find where these retreats were?
Where were the retreats I've been to? I did a writing residency at the Vermont Studio Center, and I've been there twice, and then I did one in a place called Art Hub in Kingman, Arizona, and they're all different. I think I liked the one in Arizona the most because it was a shared studio all the time, and I work best when there's stuff happening around me. I mean, not like a party or something, but just, if I'm in a room by myself, I go crazy. So I like to share the space and have the creative energy of the other people. And, as writing, as you all know, is so lonely, and I'm not, some people have that, 100% subjective, can just deal with a thing and be happy. And I'm not. I need to have other people around to feed off of. But I got stuff done at all of these places, and it was a really good experience. And it's nice to be around other people who are creating interesting things.
Great. And you also helped ghostwrite a book, didn't you? What was that about?
I don't know if you call it ghostwriting. A friend of mine who's a comic got a book deal, and she asked me to help her write it. She kind of had put a lot of stuff off, and it was getting near her deadline, and she was starting to freak out. So I like when I can find someone who I can collaborate with. Yeah. I think that's amazing. And we had a good friend in common who we both collaborated with, and he passed away a few years ago. And when she suggested we work on this, I thought, okay, and we turned out to work very well together. It was just, I'm not such a loner. And it's better than, I think it's better than it was if either of us had done the project.
Now, someone asked if you were Finnish by chance?
I'm not Finnish. And it just, the start of the novel takes place in World War II in Finland, and there's a very unusual history there, which most people don't know about, but it's the only place where the Jews and the Nazis were fighting on the same side. So it was this really fraught environment for the Jews who lived there. Their country was attacked by Russia, and since Russia was helping the Allies fight the Germans, none of the Allies would come to their aid. So they called upon the Germans to help them fight the Russians. And, they were terrified the Russians would come back because the Russians had been in control of Finland for 100 years and weren't very nice. But then all of a sudden there were thousands of German soldiers in their country, and they didn't know what would happen if they won, if the Germans would leave. And, it's a really fascinating part of history that I ended up incorporating into the first part of this book.
Well, that's great. And that's taking a little bit of history and using your own belief in your own self, your own writing ideas, and creating something. That's great. Someone also asked a little bit more about the loneliness with you. If they were with that.
I could talk about that.
Okay.
It is very solitary. Most of my life, I was a college teacher, so I had a lot of interaction with students and colleagues. So, I would do that 3 or 4 days a week. So I had a lot of people interaction, and I am an extrovert. So I kind of welcome the solitude of writing by myself. I mean, if I was just doing this 7 days a week, it might be too lonely. The other thing is that I'm in a writing group. I've been in this group many, many years, and I totally recommend, if you want to get published, if you want to keep going, be in a writing group, be part of a writing community, and then you bring your work in, you get workshop feedback, you make the work better, and you also feel like you're not so lonely. So, I mean, I might be writing alone, but then I bring the work into the group, and then I get the feedback. They might say it's bad. They might give me whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that, you're not alone when you're workshopping, and you really do need to be, I think, by yourself to be writing. That's my opinion. But, and the pandemic, as I said, the loneliness worked out for me because I produced a book in the solitude. So it was all good.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Carol, do you want to talk about loneliness or anything with that? Or
Yeah, well, I belong to Harold's writing group, which is really great. And that was kind of how I finished writing my novel, which I'd always struggled with fiction. I consider myself primarily a poet. So that, being able to read chunks of that book to the group on certain weeks really helped a lot. Also, Eddie made a good point about these writers' retreats. I've been to a couple, and I'm generally an introvert, and I kind of, go off on my own a lot. But the thing about these writers' retreats, I went for a week, and it really gets you to take yourself seriously as a writer. And I'm retired now, but at that time, years ago, I was still working full time. And when you have a full-time job that doesn't really have much to do with your writing, you get sucked into that, and you tend to, define yourself by that, and then you become more and more unhappy. But just being able to get away from that environment for a week and be around other writers and read your stuff in a workshop and have people react to it, it's really great for getting yourself to take yourself seriously as a writer.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, we do offer this with Middle Church every Thursday. If you're interested in being a writer and looking for a group, we have a fabulous group that's getting things finished all the time. This same link every Thursday from 6:30 to 8. Ben, you want to talk about loneliness and writing as well?
Yeah, sure. I was going to loop back on fiction publishing for a second, and I'll sort of be my end around into talking a little bit about loneliness. So most of what I know about fiction writing, I learned vicariously from my partner, Erin, who just published her first novel with HarperCollins. And I got to sort of watch her go through that whole process. And one of the things that I thought I'd share is that, like, if you really do want to go with that more traditional publishing route, one of the things you really have to just make peace with is like the volume of rejection that you're going to experience and face. So, I mean, I believe she queried something like 25 different agents before she was able, and she, ended up with a really great agent and a wonderful agency. But, you just have to just keep putting yourself out there again and again, and going through all the, the folks who reject you. Like, likewise, they went on submission with the book and, ended up getting picked up by HarperCollins, but they went through probably 12 or 13 different publishers before they ended up there. And so, I think part of one of the things that we sort of looping back to loneliness that we don't necessarily talk about when we talk about writing as much is, especially when you're looking at people who've gotten things published, you're seeing that moment that someone has a book that's published, that moment that somebody has an article that's in a magazine, a newspaper. What you don't see is like all of the, like, I can write in my bio, like, Ben's appeared in the Washington Post and Slate and blah, blah, blah. And that sounds great. You don't see the like 65 articles I have pitched and have gotten rejected for. And so I think that like one of the things that's really, really important is just, convincing yourself and reassuring yourself that like you have something important to say, and continuing to put it out there, and realize that like you really do have to just, if you want to write and you want to write professionally and you want to publish things, it's just a process of like continuing to put yourself out there again and again and again, and move through the rejection and not let it, convince you that what you have to say isn't worth saying, because there's lots and lots of people who, will go through, a decade of rejection before they get that final break that allows them to sort of, have their voice be heard. So that's just my encouragement to sort of move through the loneliness and also the rejection of, working on a thing that is something you're feeling called to write, because oftentimes it will take that in order to, for it to actually see publication.
I second what Ben said. I mean, the pandemic memoir was kind of rushed out because it was timely, but my other memoir, I worked on for like 5 or 6 years. So it took a really long time to work on. And I totally agree with what Ben said about trying to publish a great piece in the Washington Post or Salon or Slate, because that is a way, and then hopefully your bio says you're working on a novel, you're working on a memoir. That's a really great way for an agent to find you, or an editor. So I've heard many good stories about people getting their work noticed from that, and then that led to a book. So, but again, the name of the game is persistence. You can't give up. And I know so many people who've gone through so much rejection, 30 rejections, and then finally the book got published, so you can't give up if you want to be a writer.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Natalie, do you want to say anything about that, getting published and all that sort of stuff for you?
I will speak into the loneliness factor, I think, probably more accurately, because my publishing journey has been kind of happenstance. I just happen to know someone who is an editor, and knows me, and like, was like, oh, well, I know somebody who's looking for a writer for this. Are you interested? So it's been that sort of journey for me, which I know is usually not the way. But I think that there are periods depending. This particular book that we wrote, we had to do very quickly. I think we signed the contract in October, and the first draft was due March 1. So wow. We were getting it in. For me, what I find helps, at least in this journey, was that I had a lot of other stuff going on, and so I had to be really regimented, because I can be a very distracted writer as well, and find all kinds of other things. My house is never cleaner than when I need to, like, write a sermon or something. So I was in the middle of a contract with the symphony in Indianapolis. There was just a bunch of things that I was doing at the same time that I was writing. So it made me be a little more regimented. And I think also having a co-author helped me, like, with accountability around, deadlines and that sort of stuff. So it didn't feel as lonely as some of the other stuff. When I was doing the devotionals, we would sign those contracts a year out, and then I had a whole year to produce this, and I only needed to write like 8 of them. This time I wrote 50 or so, but I only needed to write like 8 of them, and it was like pulling teeth, because I had this large amount of time, and it felt like well, it's only this little amount, but like the parameter didn't work for me. So what I've learned is that whatever it is, I need to just like kind of shrink it in for myself, to get it done. So the deadline was actually March 1, but I gave myself the deadline of February 23rd, so that I could get it done. And then if something happened, then okay, but can I like be done and put like a trip? Like I went to Indianapolis, I think that weekend, like the 24th through the 26th. I didn't have any days to like, that really had to be the deadline. So for me, that was really helpful, and made me feel less alone in the writing process.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to ask a couple of the writers who come here Thursday who have some pieces done if they have any questions, because they're not raising their hand, they're asking them. And I know they have a ton of questions. Dan, what kind of questions do you have to some of these published writers that you can ask here to help you?
Honestly, Harold, I didn't raise my hand because I don't have a question. I've been so I'm so focused right now on actually getting the work done. This has been super helpful, and especially the stuff about persistence and the comfort with rejection has been very, very helpful. But I'm just making my writing goal every single day is really just sort of where my head is right now.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part, Dan, is to have the goal and follow through with it. And I didn't want to put you on the spot. I just wanted to make sure you had a question answered. Mark, do you have any questions you want to have answered?
Well, no question specifically. I just have that real general comment, I guess, that I made in the chat room to you, and you didn't pass on. So I guess I'll just say this to the panel, all of you guys. Thank you so much for the concise, real, and practical advice and business modeling that you guys have all gone through to give us all the different avenues that we can possibly get published in. But the main thing here is just the continuing encouragement to stay with it through feeling like you're shouting into the wilderness, though not giving up, and the persistence, and to hear so many different perspectives, from high theology to history as a resource for fiction. Just a really great panel discussion, and thank you for putting it on and putting the effort into it that you did, and that's the proof of it is just in what we all got from it. So
thank you. Thanks to Reverend Darrell. He actually thought of this and got us together, and I'm grateful to have him to help us put this together. I have Mimi. Do you have any questions? I know you're around here somewhere, so just speak up if you're there, Mimi.
No, I don't have any questions per se, but I just want to echo other sentiments. This has been a great discussion for me, given me a lot of food for thought. And I'm like Dan, I'm just kind of focusing on getting finished. I've got 4 more chapters to do, and I'm on the home run. So that's where my thoughts are at the moment. But this discussion has been great, and thank you to all the panelists for your contributions and input. I really appreciate it.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Carol.
The last 3 people who spoke are regulars in Harold's writing group, and they are extremely talented fiction writers, really, really well-developed fiction, and they all deserve to be published.
Yeah, absolutely amazing work that's coming from these people. And they all came in out of just wanting to try this, and they took the prompts and they rolled with it, and they've practiced like chorus or acting or anything, and they've gotten to be a wonderful level of writing that, everyone in the classes grows. You just grow because when you practice, you grow. So again, another reminder, Thursday, 6:30 to 8, if you want to join us, same Zoom thing, same link. I want to talk one last thing about finishing. I know sometimes we have an idea and we are great with it, but how did you guys all finish your pieces? Kate, what got you to finish it? Is that a hard place for you, or is that something
Well,
that comes
I'll
easy?
talk about the pandemic memoir. I did have a deadline from my publisher, And the hardest part for that was figuring out where to and how to end it, because it was weird. I was writing about something that was really happening in real time. So, I mean, the pandemic hasn't ended even. So I had to figure out how to end the book. So that was the hardest thing for me, was figuring out how to end it. And I decided, well, I would end it last spring when it seems like things were starting to improve. I mean, obviously it could have gone on forever, but having a deadline really helps. I'll say that. Yeah.
Thank you. Ben, do you want to talk about how finishing, or you have issues with finishing, or how that is for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I got a book deal based on an article I had written. So I think for me, the biggest thing was when I sold the book, I was like, I had this moment where I celebrated and I was like, yeah, I got a book deal. And then I was like, oh, I have to write it now. Like that's the hard part. And so in some ways, I feel like that external deadline was part of what helped me like actually get the book done. Was I was just like, okay, well, I know it's got to be done by March, and whatever I end up turning in is going to be what it ends up being, and I want to be proud of it. So I think if I was to be doing it sort of the opposite way, where maybe if I was going to write another book and it was going to take more time, I would still probably try to set some sort of deadline for myself. I think that, at least for me, that was helpful to know, like, okay, I really need this done by X date, because otherwise you can spend like an eternity like rewriting the same paragraphs, the same sentences, going through and editing again and again and again. And so it was really nice to just sort of have like this date where I'm like, well, come hell or high water, it's done on March 7th, and that's the way it's going to be. And so it really helped me both focus and then also not end up rewriting the thing 12 times, because it's going to go through editors and things anyways, and you can spend a whole lot of time self-editing when in fact your best edits may come from somebody else who's reading it. So,
and I think that's a great comment there, Ben. Editors are very important, and they're going to have a say in it, and it's well worth letting them have their say and just getting it done. Eddie, do you have any comments about finishing and getting a story complete?
Well, I agree. Like having a deadline for my book was key. This novel I'm working on, there's no deadline, and I've been working on it in fits and spurts for a long period, and I can get overwhelmed by the project just in the snap of a finger. I'll be like working on something, and I was like, oh my God, there's a whole book here, And sometimes I've even enlarged my type so that it's just that sentence I'm working on the screen, because I can't, the rest of it just seems too overwhelming. But I wish that I try to impose self deadlines, but I'm just bad at it. I mean, that's part of my territory. And as I said, I have a short attention span. I do have a great tool that I found. It's a program called Self-Control, and it's free. You can download it to your computer, and you can set a timer for anywhere between 15 minutes and 24 hours, and it completely blocks your computer's ability to connect to the internet. And there's no override. So, if you're just there with the computer, and it's like all you can do, and it's been super helpful.
Thank you, Eddie. That's a great tool for people who do get distracted easily from writing with their computer and issues with that. Thank you. Does anyone else want to have say about endings and things like that? Natalie, do you have anything with that?
Sorry, I went back for seconds. I use the Pomodoro Method a lot. I'm big on like needing a deadline too, but like as far as like making me, as my advisor James Cone would say, Dr. James Cone would say, sit your ass in that seat and write, right? So for me, like I have to find the tricks that will make me do that. And the Pomodoro Method helps for me. It's setting like a 20-minute timer.
Oh,
just got to get through 20 minutes, right? And then you have a 5-minute break and then another 20 minutes, and breaking it up into those little manageable, sections makes me feel like it's not like this daunting, unending task. Because at the end of the day, I just need to make it through 20 minutes, right? Yeah. And sometimes like I'll get through the 20 minutes and the timer will go off and I'll like be in a, I'll be on a roll, thank God. But sometimes a 20-minute timer will go off and I'll be so glad that it did. I'll take my little 5-minute break and come back to it, or I'll live to fight another day, whatever. But at least I had like putting it in a very tight container for me is helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a great little tool as well. Carol, did you want to add?
My biggest enemy was writer's block. When I was trying to finish my novel featuring urban cats as characters, you know, I'd go through these fallow periods. I didn't have the benefit of a deadline to like push me. But when that happened, I found that I just kind of acquired a lot of books that I thought were kind of relevant to what I was trying to do, you know, either through Google searches or whatever. And reading those books, even if they were only tangentially related to what I was doing, kind of provided some fodder and some creative input. So when I had those fallow times, I just read. I read like, you know, old books, old series on with cat characters. I read Paul Gallico, who did great stories featuring animals, and you know, nonfiction books about wild cats around the world, and books on cat behavior, you know, and training cats. And, you know, I just became sort of saturated with all this information. And that kind of helped me finish the book and gave me ideas for things that could happen in the plot.
Oh, great, Carol. That's a wonderful way of finishing and helping as well. Thanks for adding that. Now, there's someone put out a question, and I have to send that out to you guys. What is harder for you guys, finishing or starting? Kate, you want to take that?
I was going to say something else, but I will say probably starting. But what I wanted to say about getting the work done is I taught writing at NYU for a very long time, and it was continuing ed. The classes were not cheap. Okay, so the students would say, I've got a deadline. You know, I would give them assignments every week. So they kind of felt like I have to produce my work because otherwise I'm wasting my money, I'm wasting my time. So I feel like taking classes, even if they're, you know, a group like this, because you feel like I'm not going to show up without my work. And that's how I feel with my own writing workshop. It's like, why am I going to spend 2 hours of my time every week and not bring in work? That's silly. So, I mean, taking classes, whether they're free or you're paying for them, all my students told me that being in a class and having the class as the deadline helped them produce because they didn't want to come to class empty-handed. And yeah, so I'd say take classes, be in a workshop.
That's absolutely, yeah, thank you very much for that, Kate. Absolutely. You know, when you have to show up and you have to be present in a class, it's great to have some work with you. So definitely, it does motivate you. And if you talk to Mark or Dan or even Mimi, just showing up on a weekly basis, all three of those have finished books in a year by showing up and just writing a little bit for class. And that's pretty amazing. For all of them. I'm grateful for the, and even Carol, that's exactly how she got her book together about the cats. It's, you know, just even that 30 minutes of writing on a weekly basis, think of that in 52 weeks, you have a book.
It took me like 2 years to finish my cat novel, which is not very long, by the way, but it's just miraculous that I finished it in that time.
But you were also writing other things during that time too, Carol. You took breaks from it, I believe, as well. Like I think Mimi and Dan and Mark have been really just staying steady with it and writing their books out. I do want you guys to all put your books in the chat room so everybody has them. Just if you can, or your pieces published, if you can put that in the chat room so everybody gets to have that. And then I will copy it and I will send it out in an email as well. Let's do last thoughts from everybody and hear from that. Natalie, do you have any last thoughts about writing that you'd like to help put out there for all these eager writers to help encourage them to write out as well? Start with Natalie there. Yep, there.
Sorry, my mute button was revolting. I think just keep swimming, honestly. Like what Ben was saying about rejection is real. And so like, hopefully you are choosing this because it is the thing that you have to do, right? Like you don't have a choice but in your heart to write. And so like do go the way your blood beats, to quote Piers Baldwin.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Natalie. Eddie, any encouraging things from you towards our writers who want to complete and finish and get published?
Well, one of the things we were talking about just a minute ago was whether it's harder to begin or to finish. And for me, I think it's really important that I know where it's going to end. Because, a friend of mine who's a writer told another friend of mine who was starting to write a book, oh, just write, just start and write. And then this original idea just got so big and kept expanding that it became overwhelming. Whereas if you know where it's going to go, even though the story expands, it's coming back to that point, and it's easier to not let it get unwieldy. So I know for me, that's just crazy because I'll just go off in 4 zillion different directions.
No, thank you, Eddie. That's very helpful. I know that'll help a lot of people figure it out. And Ben, how about you? What kind of things do you want to add?
Sure. The first thing I would say is just write for joy. Like, remember why you're writing. Like, ideally, if you're writing, it's because you like writing, and the more you sort of are able to have fun with that process and really just play with words and enjoy that. Obviously, you may be writing towards a publication, but as much as you can sort of not keep that end goal in mind and just keep the sort of joy of writing in mind, I think that what you end up producing will benefit for it. The other thing that I would say is I find accountability partners to be really, really helpful. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be married to another writer. So we do that for each other, but like if you can find a friend, somebody who else is writing, what I tend to find is really, really helpful. I try to do 500 words a day or 5 pages of editing. I think that's a really manageable chunk that, if you stack that in, 7 or 8 months, you'll have a draft. At the same time, like choosing a goal that's really, really manageable and doable for a day will keep you from sort of hitting those like shame spirals of like, oh, I didn't get my writing done, blah, blah, blah. And then also just have grace for yourself. There'll be days where you don't hit it. There'll be days where, you go out with friends the night before and you wake up and you're hungover and you're like, it's not the day. But like, that's just the way that life goes. So, have grace for yourself, have fun with your writing, and really just treat it like anything else that you want, to be disciplined about.
Thank you,
Ben, is your book a novel or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
Nonfiction. That's what I thought.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Those are great. Write for joy. I know I laugh every time I write. I'm always smiling happy when I'm doing my writing, and accountability is a great thing. Kate, you want to do a little final about how to inspire the people out there?
Well, one thing that's in my book is there are 12 writing prompts, because as I was writing it, my publicist, who was here and she disappeared, said, this book was healing for you. Maybe you should create some writing prompts. So if you pick up my book, you will find there are 12 prompts, and they all talk about things that happened during the pandemic. So these are opportunities to explore what we all went through, and people have used the prompts in a way that's been very healing, I think. So
that's great. That's beautiful. What a wonderful gift to have those 12 prompts in your piece. Thank you so much. Hopefully people will get the book and get those. Who else?
Writing.
Yeah, keep writing. That's right. That's right. Always write. Always write. That's the thing. And enjoy and be happy. Who else? Did we get everybody? Carol, did we get all 5 of you to say something? All right. I think so. Right? Okay, good. Great job, everybody. Thank you all so much for giving us your time and coming in here to talk about this stuff. You did beautiful work. Beautiful words are said here tonight. Thank you all so much for this. It's fabulous, fabulous. Remember again, Middle Church offers free creative writing on Zoom here every week, 6:30 to 8. If you don't want to write, tell your friends about it. It's a fabulous group. And we also meet live. If you want to do something live now, once the last Tuesday every month, Salomon Gundy's Club over on 12th and 5th Avenue, we gather writers together to have that moment too, just to hear each other and work on writing. We offer those things. So thank you all for joining us. And
Also,
thank you.
Harold, you should mention that you produce plays at Middle Church also, that you're a playwright, and there's regular productions of plays. Some of them are over Zoom, some of them are in person, but they always get recorded. We just finished another one called Steps, which was at the LGBT Center on 13th Street. It was there for 2 nights, and Harold always packs them in. So check Middle Church's website about upcoming plays and get on Harold's list by all means.
Thank you all. Thank you, Carol. You know, I wouldn't talk about me. Then thank you. And if you do want to do acting, we do acting classes every Monday night here with Middle Church. They 2 are on Zoom right now from 6:30 to 8 as well. So look into that. And thank you all again. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Eddie. Yay!
Thanks, guys.
Y'all have a great night. And I'm going to be on a little bit writing down some of the chat stuff. But if you guys want to talk amongst yourselves, please do. I'll give you a few minutes just to be here. And if not, have a great one. And I'll see you all next week. Writers next week.
I gotta eat
We're writing
dinner.
about
Thank
the
you.
stories we wanted to create.
Bye.
The stories we
Bye.
want to create.